Hey, it's Shabes, and welcome to another reaction video. This is literally my second one, and now I'm doing a 90-minute video. I'm stupid. This is also my only take, my only chance at getting through this because I don't have a whole lot of time. I actually don't. I really want to react to this though because I want to make this as timely as possible. FD Signifier, why do guys love anime? It used to be called. I remember he uploaded this and it was called Anime is pretty cool, right? Anime is good actually. And then it was changed to something I forget like what anime can teach us about masculinity, I think, and it had Berserk Carrot Aaron on the thumbnail, and then now it's this, which is why do guys like anime with him with a bunch of boobs around? It's like, okay, the message changed quite a bit. Now I will also tell you, my friends at the Weeb Crew and Pause and Select were actually reacting to this video, and then FD Signifier found it and came on and talked with him more about it. I have not watched that. I popped in a little bit, but that was before, and then I saw that he did. And it took them 6 hours. I don't have 6 hours, so I apologize if this would be kind of as curt as you can be for a 90-minute video. We'll see. This is also again anyway, I'm not going to caveat. One more thing. Unfortunately, I am playing this at 1.5 speed. I do usually watch videos like this, and I wouldn't for like a reaction video kind of posh like this because now you can't really watch it at 1.5 speed. Otherwise, it'll go at like faster. But again, it's because I want to have as much time to give thoughts, whatever they may be, to this. But for the record, I would start it. It's a lovely intro. I have watched like the first minute or two, and I was really excited about this because I see that Mother's Basement is featured in this. Super Eye Patch Wolf is featured in this. That's just really encouraging to see that FD Signifier is really incorporating parts of our community, and he's not some outsider or whatever. I don't know what kind of thing, how much he's seen or what he's seen, but I have watched his other videos. I really liked his BreadTube videos, sorts of things, and talking about Lindsay Ellis and other things like that. I've liked his stuff a lot, so I am not a complete stranger to his stuff. But again, because he was on that other live stream, I know there's a non-zero chance he will see this. Yeah, so anime is weird. He starts it with this. And he's not wrong. And at first I was like, what is this? I've seen a little bit of the video, like the start of it. But then I'm like, I should probably react to this. Yep, it's this show. Right. I'm pretty defensive when it comes to like anime being seen as this weird thing, because it has been for so long, but there's a lot of great stuff too, guys. I know. And I'm sure FD knows about that too, but not for debate.
Not weird because culturally we don't understand it. It's not weird because it's cartoons. It's weird because it's made by weird people for weird people. And if you watch anime, you should do it with a condom on your brain or you're going to catch the weird. I know this from experience. In fact, once upon...
I kind of get that. Because if you getting desensitized to kind of weird stuff and everything. I took issue obviously with like, this is about where I stopped actually. But like... weird, made by weird people. I know you're being hyperbolic, and the thing is like, I can already tell that you're biting off way more than than this will probably bite off a lot more than you can chew. I'm already getting the vibes. I'm like, even 90 minutes. I don't think there's gonna be a lot of cracks. I'm assuming, but like assuming that this is made by weird people. Maybe sure there's some credence to that, I guess, but it's just this like casting this wide net of like individuals and humans that are making this art, you know what I mean? I would wish that we be treated with some modicum of respect, even if they may be kind of weird or eccentric, a good number of them. Like, I am not going to deny that they're not eccentric or weird for a lot of the most high profile ones, right? Like Tomino or Ano or whatever, but like, don't just assume that. There's hundreds of thousands of people who've worked on anime, and it's like, it's just a broad statements like this that just don't sit well with me.
On the time, I may have been what some people would call a weeb. I don't think I ever got that deep into it. I was a little too old for it. It was a long time ago. When I was younger, Anime was much harder to get access to. Dragon
Yes.
Ball, Ronin Warriors, Sailor Moon, stuff like that made it to like Saturday morning cartoons every once in a while. I, like many future men of culture, convinced my mom to rent me Ninja Scroll from Blockbuster a few times during middle school. By high school,
A couple
like a
times.
nerd, I joined the football team and tried to act like I'd never shouted out a special attack while jumping off the couch in my pajamas.
Right.
By the time I got to college in the early 2000s, Toonami was bringing anime to a larger audience, but by then I was actually learning how to talk to girls, so I wasn't paying as much attention as I probably should have. Surprisingly, the closest I ever got to being a full-blown weeb was in my late 20s when I was a high school teacher. I ended up sponsoring anime clubs and was exposed to just how big anime had gotten since those Toonami days in the early 2000s.
Yeah, I didn't even grow up on anime that much. I had seen 4Kids tunes. I was born in '94, if you want to know my age. And it was more like 4Kids Toonzai, and Netflix had some stuff like when they just started becoming a streaming service. So you had like Oron and Fruits Basket, stuff like that. Like Funimation put a couple of their titles on there. But it really wasn't until college that like I sank in, and that by that time you have Crunchyroll, but also Kiss Anime and other things like that. It's the access. I totally agree.
I was binging Naruto and Bleach, and also diving into things like Gurren Lagann and Madoka Magica and Code
There you go.
Geass
All right.
Monster that you want to
Hey.
see on Toonami, you have to look for them.
There you go.
Watch them on one of those sites that's likely to give your computer diseases. And from that, I was pretty much hooked. I
Facts.
started reading a lot of manga for anime that weren't getting second season. So suddenly, I had a collection of Spice and Wolf books. Still holding out for season 3, guys. It's only been like a decade. I even discovered.
When'd you record this? They just announced a reboot. Anyway, I know you know that. You probably know that. You probably got tons of comments. Yeah.
In the late 2000s, early 2010s. So I watched influential creators like Beatrice the Golden Witch, Giga, Kanido, Glass Reflection, and the legendary cryptid Demolition D. I was in there. Like,
He's in there.
Don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But there's
He's in it. Fair. That's great. Cool. Epic. Let's see if he's retained any. But also, like, you know, Arcada and even Beatrice and all these guys, right? Like, especially in the frame that he's talking about, we've all made mistakes. We've all made bad takes or proliferated certain ideas about anime or industry and stuff like that like have kind of skewed the percent. And that's even before YouTube. Some of the people that I'll be talking about in a future video I've been working on a long time is this anime encyclopedia. It's written by these two academics who have been in the fandom for a very long time, have worked in the industry as well. And, you know, they have opinions and takes and perspectives that have kind of skewed Western perception of anime. Like the idea of like sports anime being kind of a waste of time or all the same or whatever. So that's not as popular of a genre here in the West as is everywhere else. Slam Dunk being the primary example of that.
And here was this untapped world of media and good stories at my fingertips.
Facts.
For free. Thousands of shows and
Yeah.
that I just indulged
No,
in.
no, but like literally, yes, because I was into video games and then I went to college and I had no money. So I couldn't follow any video games. I was mostly a Nintendo guy anyway. But then anime, I was able to find it. So I was able to watch it. And yeah, I would not be here. I wouldn't be as much of a fan as I am. And now working in the anime industry, I help produce Blu-rays for Discotech Media. I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't free at one point.
Until Sword Art Online came out. And all of a sudden, anime stopped being the cool weird that I've always loved and started being that weird I was talking about at the very beginning of the video. I know
At SAO? 2012? Okay. Well, I guess. I'm sure he can attest that it's always had its strands of weirdness literally the entire time. From the 60s through onwards. There's been plenty of these shows where you're like, what the fuck? In the 60s and the 70s and everything like that. It's not that they've suddenly been weird or anything. I don't know. That's an interesting take.
But almost the whole time while growing distant with anime, I also became very much invested in working with young men and boys. I've been a teacher that whole time, but also consistently worked with young people outside of work, eventually moving into working with at-risk youth in the juvenile court systems, which led to working in public health. And during that whole process, I was also studying gender and health at the graduate school level, and I had 2 little boys of my own. The combination of my work and my studies and my experiences led me to really become more invested in the issues and challenges that face young men and boys. I watched a lot of young men and boys struggle through life, struggle through the juvenile court system, struggle through their teenage years, but also friends and peers struggle in adulthood, struggle with substance addiction, struggle with divorce, struggle with parenting, struggle with death. And some of these men even met unexpected and untimely deaths of their own at their own hands. And this grew in me a desire to say something, to do something, to offer in whatever way I can anything to help out the young men and boys that I have been seeing struggling throughout the course of my life. And somewhere along the line, that brought me to YouTube. And although I didn't start YouTube with that specifically in mind, it clearly has been a core feature of the type of content that I make on this channel.
Yeah, and that's great. I think he obviously has more experience than me, but I just want to posit my experience if we're sharing. I I'm not like as invested like a personal invest in like really doing all these different programs as he is. Um, but I'm in a similar way working with youth and working with I've been working with the Boy Scouts of America for over 10 years. At least I was in the program, and then when I turned 18, by that time I had been working at a particular camp, and I've worked there for over 10 years. So I'm a similar position of like, but not in the same like vested position, I guess. I'm not like, oh, I have a unique particular interest in the development of this youth and necessarily as much as I like what I do and I think it's valuable and additive. And yeah, it's just kind of what I fell into. But I do have a similar kind of background or perspective. Not to say it's the same vested interest as he does.
I'm going to talk about anime. After a long time away from the medium, the intersection of anime and all of the men and young guys who like it has brought me to ask a question. Why do guys like anime? Awesome. It's really simple. What draws boys and men to anime?
I'm happy he actually has the question like that, and then that seems to be the settled title of the video and not just like the grabby one. I guess the anime is good actually was the grabby one. I mean, generally him like a bigger YouTuber like him who doesn't normally talk about anime is now talking about anime is still kind of an interesting thing for me, regardless of what the title and thumbnail was. But I'm happy that it is an actual reflection of what the video is meant to be. That's nice.
Is anime all just fantasy fulfillment and animated titties, or is there something deeper for boys to glean from the medium if they make the effort? But because I spent so much time,
I'm really hoping it's the latter. I mean, I don't think it would be the kind of sustained thing that it is. You know what I mean? And also people like me, like only watching Naruto 2 years ago when I'm a full grown adult, like 26, watching Naruto, just because it was something that was on my radar and my friends were doing it, the pandemic, etc. And it's still good. Yeah, and not even still good. Like I never watched it when I was a kid, when I was the proper demographic necessarily. And I still found a lot of value in it because it's a story that really took itself seriously and had a lot of intricacy and depth and cool moments. And it wasn't just kind of like, here's something to put on to sell things. It has an actual longevity. I know he's not necessarily arguing for Naruto in particular, and that's why I'm starting to be like, okay, which shows are you going to be focusing on? Like, what are we talking about here, Because when you're starting to talk about anime broadly, it's not just for guys. A lot of it, like Mobile Suit Gundam, I've been wanting, it seems like a boys thing, but the longevity that initially it tanked, it actually wasn't doing that well in the ratings, and it was a teenage demographic, not just with boys, but a lot of young women who really got into Gundam. Or whatever, I don't want to speak for them, but they were a big reason why Gundam was so successful and became such a big franchise that it is. And I had to sorry, this is just a reaction video, not like an anecdotal, here's the source or whatever. But yeah, that's a big case for it. Yeah. But it's like focus, it's good to have this focus, don't get me wrong. I'm just wondering is like where particularly are we going to be focusing on, because I feel like there's no matter what angle he's going to be taking in, there's always going to be a broader thing. And that's why I think there might be too much he can chew here, but we'll see.
Out of anime for the last decade, I figured I'd bring in two people that have kept the pulse on the culture to support me in this journey.
The awesome factor is a big deal, right? Like that's obviously a big part of it. That's what sucks kids into Naruto, into My Hero Academia. Underneath that, one of the like common themes that you'll find in basically any thing that follows the shonen formula or the shonen battle formula is this undercurrent of like training and growth and self-betterment, trying to be stronger both physically by getting better powers, but also like most of the characters will go through some kind of emotional arc where they like really develop as a person, and that happens in tandem with the development of their powers, and that creates a metaphorical connection. And then when they beat somebody up, they're not just beating them up and it's awesome, that's a big part of it, but they're also contending with their ideals and kicking their ideals' asses.
Whatever example I could give you about literally any piece of anime, I'm sure I could find 4 or 5 animes to immediately counter that and be like, well, this one's like this. When you talk about anime specifically, it is genuinely like asking, well, what does American cinema provide?
Yeah, thank you. Oh my gosh, John with the base take. Let's fucking go. I was gonna mention with Jeff's take. I mean, that's a good that was good. I really liked his answer there. And even just with if we're just talking about Battle Shonen, literally Shonen Jump, their motto is effort, friendship, and victory. You know, it's those three values. And it's not just the protagonist that's going on this journey and everything. So many of them are so big. They expand their scope so much that there's so many different characters that are telling different kinds of stories and different journeys and struggles and stuff. And you learn more about the villains too, and it's just sort of like perspectives. It just makes you think. It's not just popcorn entertainment that is like, oh, the guy punched the guy. Like, yeah, that's cool. But it really makes you think and feel things, you know?
And really takes this idea of you're a kid and you can reach these states of being an advanced self, being like becoming a Super Saiyan. I was in therapy the other fucking day and had to experiment. I had to explain to my therapist what Super Saiyan was. Yeah, it's not my finest moment. That's not going in the video, is it, Fee?
No, it's not going in the video.
That's excellent.
For today's sponsor, I kind of want to say, simply put, is Japanese animation, and manga is Japanese cartoon drawing. The terms anime and manga go back well over a century,
right.
But what it means now is very different than what it might have meant way in the 19th century. And that's kind of it for background in terms of like things I know I want to get yelled at about.
Good idea. Yeah, great idea there. I'm not even gonna. Yeah, good idea.
And I'm sure, knowing anime fans, something I just said will get me yelled at, but I just want to.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would have kind of like been peeved at, it isn't even in the video anymore. One of the iterations of the thumbnails, it was like, what did anime teach us about masculinity? And you're showing Berserk and Eren from Attack on Titan. And they're both manga. Like, they're originally yes, they have anime adaptations, and most people may have experienced them through anime. Maybe not Berserk, but but yeah, it's like which one are we talking about in a lot of those cases? But yeah, that's fine.
Put the disclaimer out that as we go forward in this video, this is all subjective and very much my opinion and assessment based on the information that I have. All right?
I just want to be clear. There's no maybe about this.
If there's no way to land on this and stick the landing, somebody's gonna be pissed off.
Talking about anime on the internet is like it's like jumping off a building, landing on a trampoline, and halfway down you're like, wait a minute, there's no trampoline.
It actually can be quite difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, this was easy. Wait. Yeah, especially when you're trying to like give facts, when you're trying to like introduce statistics, when you're trying to be objective. Don't even try. or be very good. Like, really, it is possible to kind of out research and outdo other people and kind of have a definitive thing. I would say Steven is up there as one of those individuals that are just so cutting edge of just like debunking a lot of things and expanding our knowledge about stuff. But you're right. But I think it's cool to just stick to this is my perspective. This is how it makes me feel. It makes me think of this. And, you know, just kind of broadening your surroundings and just talking about the media itself and not making generalizations. I feel like when you're going to start making generalizations is when people are going to be like, well, what about this? Or do you think about this? Or think of the broad thing. You know what I mean? That's when you're going to start getting a little hot water.
To effectively define what anime is or what anime isn't, and that previous definition barely shows the breadth of the concept of anime as a whole. For example, Nickelodeon's Avatar: The Last Airbender or The Dragon Prince or even Arcane on Netflix are clearly heavily influenced by anime, but technically don't count as such because if you just go by the definition of anime, then it must be made in Japan to count. But then you may say that if it's made in Japan, it also needs to have, you know, the big eyes and the colorful hair and whatnot, but then something like Ping Pong the animation, which doesn't have those features but is made in Japan, wouldn't count either. So you kind of see...
Yeah, that's not a stylistic thing. The definition for the one that I work with, and people can have their different interpretations, whatever. Because even One Piece is not made by Japanese people anymore. Like, we literally, like a couple weeks ago, you had Henry Thurlow as the first non-Japanese and episode director. Yeah, he was an episode director for an episode of One Piece. That's a really big deal. That's really huge. It's not just for being One Piece, but for being an episode director, which is such a coveted position in that field. That's a huge deal. And so it's like, it's kind of a combination of, to me, my definition is like made in Japan for a Japanese audience, you know, because it's one thing, because like a show could be completely produced in Japan. Like, you think of the 80s with like the Transformers and all these other shows, that there were many adventures of Winnie the Pooh. There's so many of these animations that were subcontracted to Japan. Batman the Animated Series has several episodes like that, and Stevens talked about that Studio Ghibli was involved with that. But it's like, it's the combination of, it's not just for made by Japanese people because they have some particular thing about them, but it's also for a Japanese audience. It's their sensibilities or their market and that sort of thing. It's kind of that dual pronged thing. And so that way, just by that definition, you're able to have any style you want, which is one of my favorite things about anime. It's not just the big eyes and big whatever. And the fact is that, we're so into anime because it's not just that they're doing these like complex big stories and they're cool action and they're talented at animation and all these other things, but it's just they have the breadth. They can do whatever they want. They have so many of these sports series, so many just slice of life with Iyashike, that just don't have much in the way of like plot and conflict, but are still very serene and fun and interesting, great to watch. That you don't have anyone in the West make it. You may have a couple, maybe somewhere, especially maybe all over the world. There's world animation to consider as well, but no one's doing it like Japan. I'm sorry. That's why we're here.
It's really complex. What I would say is that anime is just best described as a medium of animation combined with both
Yes.
a cultural and visual aesthetic that, in my opinion, is pretty much unique to Japan. And this is probably most easily explained by
Pretty
possibly
much.
the first ever anime in a modern sense, by the show Astro Boy by Osamu Tezuka in the 1950s. Tezuka is an interesting guy because he's often seen as Japanese Walt Disney, and he's a huge influence on the entirety of the world of animation in Japan. He's also an interesting figure because he was like a workaholic whose last words were reportedly him begging on his deathbed to be allowed to go back to work. For a short period of time, he was even in Japan's Communist Party, which definitely had to be interesting. But more importantly, he gave the world Astro Boy, which also gives us the inception of what I think makes anime very unique in terms of the medium of animation, especially as it pertains to this video. See, Astro Boy is where we get the big eyes. It's where we get the spirited young boy main character, aka the shonen protagonist. But more importantly, it's
Yeah, kinda. There's a lot of these that you're gonna have this all the time. The actuallys and everything, and I can't even fully disagree with Astro. I think Astro Boy is a fair pick, but like you kind of have to look at the. It's not just anime really. Like Tezuka has a very long manga period before Astro Boy too. And what was Toei Animation doing in the 5 or 6 years? I think Hakujaden's 58. I think that was their first animated film. Between then and Astro Boy, right? And yeah, like Tezuka's a big deal. I don't want to downplay him or anything. I highly recommend if he's watching this somehow, it will be linked in the description. Hopefully I remember it. It's The History of Mushi Pro by Animetudes. He's on Twitter, but he has like a whole WordPress and everything, and he's still working on it. It's still happening, but like he already did like the Astro Boy era, and Tezuka's perspective and why he started his animation studio, and you just learn more about him. And it wasn't just him; it's this other producer guy that passed away very unexpectedly, and that's what really kind of led this really unfortunate chain of events of other things. And I don't know, it just really, I highly recommend that. I highly recommend that.
See, Astro Boy isn't just beating villains of the week. He's involved in geopolitics. He's got messages about discrimination and environmentalism. And like his heart is a nuclear reactor, which I'm pretty sure might have some significance in Japan. And this is unlike in the West, where animation is seen mostly as a medium aimed at children.
To be fair, I actually haven't seen any of the iterations of Astro Boy yet. I mean, not many people can really say that they've seen Astro Boy 63 because almost none of it is subtitled, and you have 98 episodes that were dubbed and brought to the West. You can watch those. And there's also the 80s series and 2000 series, but I don't know how many of them have really mentioned the nuclear heart and how much that plays it. Maybe it does, but not from what I've seen, not from what I've like experienced offhand. But not to downplay your point or anything. It's just like you should watch some. You can watch the 1980s version, which I believe. I know Bob Samurai actually made a really great Astro Boy beginner's guide. You should definitely check that out. Of which series you watch. But like, I mean, it's one thing to talk about Astro Boy and another to actually have talked about it, having seen it. You know what I mean? I'm getting a vibe that's like, yeah, Astro Boy. And like, did you watch one episode? Did you watch a ton of it? Like, there's a lot of that sort of thing. You're not alone in doing this. Tons of anime YouTubers or just other people talk about anime. I was talking about just a second ago, but me assuming that Astro Boy doesn't necessarily have that heart. But that's why I like to clarify whenever I talk about these sorts of things that I'm like, having seen it, or granted I haven't seen it, I usually kind of make that caveat for me personally. But yeah,
So why is it that anime is allowed to be so much more adult and complex compared to Western animation? And I don't have a really good reason for that, but I think one of the core aspects of it is that anime, to an extent, is more artistically pure or artistically driven in comparison to Western animation, which probably sounds ridiculous to those of you who know anything about capitalism in Japan, which is like the best capitalism, which is also like the worst capitalism. The anime and manga industry is saturated with exploitation of labor, so it's not like it's a better version, but just like, follow me for a second. Japan as a culture is more collectivist than the West, which means that culturally they're more likely to just go along to get along. And when you combine this with the uncaring coldness of capitalism, it produces a horrible culture of work that, while exploitative and horrifying, also leads to an attitude of leaders leaving their workers to have more autonomy compared to the type of micromanagement and focus testing oversight that we'll have in pretty much any type of work in the West. So, like, take that and then combine that with the fact that most anime start out as stories created by a singular artist with a very specific and explicit story in their head, something that they want to get out there to hopefully get them noticed and get picked up and be made into a bigger anime or manga. And of course, all of these stories are very much capable of being highly derivative of other media that these artists consume or are informed by popular tropes. But even in the most derivative stories, there's still that fact that these artists can lead the story into whatever way they want to, pretty much from jump. So an anime may start out.
Yeah. I mean, a lot to big part there, but I'm not a big fan of making the generalizations about their culture and Japanese culture because it's not a monolith. As monolithic as monocultural Japan of any country could be. And I'm not saying that out of my ass. I'm just trying to, like, from my roommate's perspective, that he just came back from 3 months in Japan. It's like, yeah, a lot of people, there's a lot of similarities and there's a lot of conformity and a lot of things are streamlined and it just creates a different kind of culture. But what that like translates to the medium itself, I would have liked a couple of actual quotes from some analysts. There's plenty of analysts that I think that have probably tried to look into this. I haven't personally, but, like, I don't know, making these bigger points and stuff like that. It's just a very easy pitfall. It's just a very common pitfall for a lot of YouTube, and it's not the most encouraging thing. It's not. I'm not enraged or anything. It's just sort of like, yeah. I guess he's not making such egregious claims or anything like that. There hasn't been something insanely wrong yet, at least from what I can tell.
As a manga made by just one guy who was working on it on his own, and maybe he'll get like a small team of assistants, or in this concept called light novels, which are basically short chapter books. And there will be editors and producers that come and help a little bit, but compared to the brand managed, focus tested, significant oversight that we see in the West, it might as well be independently produced by comparison. And when
well, he's not considering production committees with when it comes to anime specifically. If we want to talk about anime in particular, of like what gets made, that's a big decision by a group of people, and that's been an established system since the 90s. Maybe he talks about it later. I don't know if I watch the whole thing. That's usually why I don't like doing reaction videos, because I don't like to say something and then the video says it anyway. It's like, oh okay. But production committees is a big way that anime gets made now, ever since the 90s, where it's a group of people that are deciding to invest money into this thing so that they can make money, sorts of things. And so that's decided by committee. But even then, anime as well, yes, you're right, manga is largely being made by one person with some editors and some assistants, but that is in the wider ecoscope of, say, a magazine, or in the case of anime, it's a wide industry. Like, there's a lot of people working on this title, the director and multiple animators and composers and voice actors and episode directors and storyboard artists and animation directors and what they did to get this show, things goes on, background artists, tons and tons and tons of people. So I mean, it's more of a collective work than, I hate to actually, it sounds like an actually, honestly, but, like, I don't know, I don't really know where that point is going. I guess maybe we'll find out.
When these mangas or light novels or whatever become animes, there is a definite increase in the oversight and production, but
Yeah.
relatively little will be changed from the original story that the author had in mind when he started. So this amounts to a
Yeah, ideally, sometimes, but other times, no. No. What are we gonna change for the anime? We could probably make it better. They're two mediums at different mediums at the end of the day. Different an adaptation of something. There's going to be a lot of changes and differences, I think. But I guess I'm nitpicking at this point. We'll see what his broader point is.
medium dominated by unique artistic voices. And since many of these creators, specifically creators of shonen anime, which are the anime that are generally the most popular and explicitly directed at young boys, that's what shonen means. These folks start out creating a lot of this stuff when they're just young boys themselves, and then they're influenced both by their experience.
It's funny the sentence just ended right at the same clip, but like, am I wrong in that maybe you got this comment already, but like, I'm pretty sure Demon Slayer was written by a woman, and at least FMA was written by a woman. You know, uh, again, it's making big generalizations here, and I mean, Tezuka and Leiji Matsumoto and other of these guys, vice versa, they were writing girls manga for a long time as well. There's a lot of cross pollination here. It's not just men. It's a very male dominated. Don't get me wrong, but don't take the out of the equation. You know, and it's actually a pretty significant deal, and it's not really a safe thing to assume that, oh, this must be written by a man. Don't ever assume that, because you never know. You never know.
But also the medium they grew up consuming, and then the core demographic that they're producing this content for is also young men like them. And so what you have is a medium with a uniquely dynamic artistic voice when it comes to engaging with boyhood and masculinity. You get shows like My Hero Academia, which is not like a groundbreaking original show. It's a shonen superhero manga, but it refines all of the main tropes and themes from this type of show into its best elements. So yes, we get.
And I'm hoping to make a video about this at some point, about battle shonen in particular, especially to make the point that these aren't the most popular by virtue of being for boys. These are the most popular titles because they are the broadest appeal. Men and women, girls and boys, the entire spectrum of people, of life, these are the most broadest. These are human traits. These are human appeals, you know, action, fantasy, laughs. There's a lot of humor in these titles, drama. These are not male centric. You know, like, this is a boy protagonist, sure, but like, these are universal stories, you know, and they're made of the most broadest appeal because they kind of just, it became its own genre after a few decades of refinement in a particular magazine. Not specifically Shonen Jump. Of course, you have Shonen Magazine and Shonen Sunday contributing to this, but Shonen Jump in particular just happens to have these titles that refined it in one way and then added a different element and then another element and another thing. And they're kind of an amalgam. The most popular of these titles, One Piece, Naruto, My Hero Academia, blah, 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 these are all amalgamations of the cornerstones of shonen manga that are not necessarily battle shonen. It's a whole thing, and I hope to make a video about it at some point. But yeah, there's a lot of history here, and it's whatever, right? But like, he's showing a lot of the modern stuff. He's on sort of stuff today, like My Hero Academia, Demon Slayer, Chainsaw Man, when like a lot of this was forged way earlier on, and those titles are still being felt and are influential today. Dragon Ball Z, One Piece, Naruto, Hokuto no Ken. I haven't seen it. I don't think I've seen any. I wonder what FD would think of. I wonder if he's maybe he talks about it later. But like, if you're talking about anime and masculinity, where's Fist of the North Star? You know what I mean? But I get it, broad.
Awesome action, people yelling out special attacks, and of course a bit of fan service. But we also get boys working through various forms of trauma, social commentary on the nature of justice and the role of police and authority, and dealing with toxic parents. Deku, the main character, is a perfect distillation of what a shonen protagonist can be. He's got pieces to him missing that he's trying to fill in through his adventure. He puts it all on the line for his friends. He's got a moral code that evolves over time, but he's also emotional, to a fault in some people's eyes. What makes him like kind of the ideal shonen protagonist?
You're asking the right people.
One dad, started off at the bottom. Very bottom.
And
Yes, corkless.
I don't want to make any assumptions, but like, maybe I am. I apologize if I'm misgendering somebody, but like,
He is both
it's not just for boys. It's not just for boys.
Shonen protagonist, cool. But even older stuff like Dragon Ball gives us powerful moments for boys to aspire and relate to. And no, I'm not talking about the obnoxious main character that has the even more obnoxious fan base, but his more interesting rival, Vegeta. Vegeta starts the show as a very run-of-the-mill villain of the week character, only existing for power and status, and ends the show, because the show like won't stop happening, as a symbiote.
I'm sorry, that was a weird. Did you see what the like?
Power and status, and ends
Why did he change the? Did he change the resolution at some, like, what was that?
the show ends because
And then it puts it like that and like, choose resolution. I'm sorry, the nitpick. I'm a video editor, you know. It's like, huh?
the show like won't stop happening.
The manga, sure.
Dragon Ball Z was a huge one for me, and that.
See, there you
But it
go.
wasn't
That's what I'm talking about.
who I was able to really like see myself in. It was Vegeta. To me, Vegeta is like a genuinely fantastic character, and I think his
And
whole
for people,
character
it could be
arc
Piccolo.
to do with
It could
him.
be
It is about
Bulma, maybe.
vital idea of who you are meant to be,
Maybe.
and eventually being able to let
Uh.
that go and realize that, look, you don't need to be the fucking biggest, strongest, baddest thing in the world because you're actually just okay with your wife and kid, you know, and that has never stopped resonating with me.
Calling him a tsundere is oversimplifying the fact that he was himself never taught how to develop emotional bonds with others. And then suddenly over the course of the show, he has a wife and a son whom he is deeply connected to. And the moment where he realizes this is one of the most powerful moments in all of anime.
He was meant to be the chosen one.
Again,
He was meant to be the one who beat Frieza.
generalization.
But every time he came close to greatness, he failed, and then Goku or Goku's son succeeded. And so he's just full of fucking rage about this. You know, he gives in and he becomes evil and he beats Goku. He actually beats Goku. But then this monster that's like feeding off his energy called Boo awakens, and he realizes basically what his malice, what his like desire has kind of led to, and he sacrifices himself to take out this monster. And before he does that, he hugs his son for the first time ever, and it is such. Look, I'll fucking cry. I'll fucking cry on camera right now. When I think of Vegeta's biggest moments, I don't think of the fight he wins. I think of the fact that he is able to be gentle with his son for this one moment, and what a cataclysmic shift that is from the little shit-eating heel who stepped out of the spaceship in the Saiyan Saga.
Probably one of my top 5 experiences in all of media consumption was watching the show Fooly Cooley as a young man. This surreal mindfuck of a show had more to say about boyhood and growing up and like experiencing puberty than any generic Western versions of this same story combined in just 6 30-minute episodes. There's all kinds of stories about the fear of manhood and growing up in Western literature for boys, like Black Boy or Catcher in the Rye, and movies like Stand By Me or Fresh, but animation allows so much more to happen. So yeah, you can have symbolic stuff like, I don't know, Holden Caulfield's hat, or you can have a boy whose head is a portal to another dimension where monsters escape, but also a robot who can combine with the boy to help fight these monsters.
Well, what's funny is that, like, books have technically more freedom than animation, because animation still has like limited boundaries of who's available and the timing, and you know, it'd be great. It's great if these things come together in an exciting, fresh way. Sometimes they don't, unfortunately. But like books, it's on it's words, it's the imagination and stuff, right? Like, they technically have more freedom. But I think that in particular, it's really just the visual component. It's not just like, oh, I'm imagining this world. Or that's my problem with books. And I don't mean, you know, that's why I prefer animation over reading books, because I read a book and I'm picturing it all in my head and it's wonderful. It's amazing. But I can't really share that. Not the same thing. I can't show them what's in my head. I can give them the book and maybe they'll picture it in their head. They'll get invested the way I was. And that's great. And that's, you know, the best books will do that. But a visual medium like manga or animation really gives you the precise thing that you saw and experienced. And being like, wasn't that fucking awesome? You know what I mean? That's the kind of communal, I like sharing that sort of thing. That's one of the reasons I gravitated. But I mean, to his point about like, yeah, you have these other things, and maybe I'm missing his point really, but like, I don't know. You could technically have all this stuff in book form, but it's not the same thing because you're not seeing the precise, you know, an artist's vision of, it's sort of like, oh, a TV popped out of his head. It's the way the TV pops out of his head in the animation that no words can even describe. That's what I like.
But also every once in a while, the robot like pokes a finger out the boy's head, which embarrasses him because it kind of looks like a dick. Like it's clearly a metaphor for, you know, that unwanted erection, reminding you maybe of that time you're sophomore year in high school where you're riding on the overcrowded bus and this really cute upperclassman decided that she was going to sit on your lap because her friend was sitting across from you on the bus, and you were like super excited but also really embarrassed because you started getting a little too excited and you're like praying to God that she doesn't notice what's happening. And this story is definitely not specific at all.
It is.
Yeah, and I mean, I like this part of the video so far because he's giving specific examples. He's giving instances in a show. In the show, Fooly Cooley, this scene, da-da-da-da, that's good shit. Nobody can rage at you about that. That's the good shit.
Intentionally meant to speak just directly to your subconscious, to your id. It's not like, you know, it uses the medium of animation and a whole bunch of different very avant-garde directing choices to like sort of go over and under your heads at the same time, you know, both heads. Yeah, because like, you know, the main character is like in that very delicate fluctuation space. And I'll tell you, he's like at the cusp of puberty and he's scared of it. You're fucking 12 years old, you don't really know how the world works. There's a bunch of stuff happening to your body and, you know, with the people around you that like you're only starting to understand. And like at the end of the day, you just gotta swing the bat.
One of the best things I've read in years is A Silent Voice. It follows multiple complex characters with very
There you go. Yeah.
traumas, often from bullying and social ostracism. But also, some of these characters have themselves committed heinous acts of bullying. This story, written by a female author, humanizes that experience in a way that I really wasn't ready for when I started watching it. Because it gets into the nature of struggling socially, but also peels back the dynamics of bullying and in-group, out-group dynamics in a way that you really never see in any media aimed at children. Like in media for boys in America, bullies are one-note caricatures of how we often see them in our personal lives, which is completely devoid of complexity or humanity, because that's how bullying often feels when you're on the victim side of the equation. But this manga and the movie that followed it forced us to look at the bully as a protagonist, and we have to engage with the completely reasonable process to which he finds himself bullying a girl with a disability, and then how he deals with that guilt and shame over time.
And the backlash because he bullied a deaf girl, and so everyone kind of he got alienated. He got what he deserved, and then he's like, wow, yeah. There's the guilt and all that, of course. But yeah, it's more nuanced and intricate, and I imagine it's because. Yeah, but like the deeper question that I feel like he's trying to figure out here, and like how is anime able to do this and not Western stuff, or not just American, but like London or German or Finland, like Nordic or Thai or Indian, like all these other countries had the opportunity, or maybe they didn't, or they just didn't have. It's all like the journey. It's always just like the history of it is what makes it so fascinating to me. Is like what motivated them to make this kind of story, who was there that was making these decisions, and more importantly even the people that said okay, right? Because it's just like, if you're getting to this point of commercialized television television animation, who are the people who are saying like, yes, you can do that, or or I don't care. There's a very likelihood that they weren't even watching what was going on. And of course it's the creators who are willing to put that stuff out, but it's also the other people who are saying like, yeah, sure, all right. Or it's like, well, will it make me money? Great. You think of like the Hays Code. You think of how much that set us back in the US. Where would we be without that? Maybe even further than everyone else. I don't know what would have happened, but oh well, it happened. So we have to, and so those causes, right? And I think he mentioned it really briefly, like the Reagan administration, rolling back a couple of TV restrictions that allowed, commercialization of like these shows that you could sell toys alongside with. That was, I think that I could be misinterpreting that, but it's like, what was happening during that time in the US that prevented us from having shows like Astro Boy or etc., and what was the sort of, it's certain titles that have this element to them that's like, oh, they got away with that and people liked it, what can we, and it extends beyond manga and anime. It actually, you could talk about live action tokusatsu, like Godzilla or Kamen Rider, Super Sentai, etc. Some of them are actually dealing with these sorts of ideas too. So it's like, where does it all come from? It's like, it's a whole different, it's a lot of stuff. So it's, yeah.
I could go on forever, literally forever, but you get the point. There's
Same.
great stuff
Same.
if you're willing to press through the ugliness a little bit and adjust your sensibilities and open your mind to the idea that animation is more than just kids' cartoons and jiggle physics. So in this moment, I want to
more than Pokemon or porn.
Everyone who watches this video, that if you don't watch anime at all, you should try it out. Yes, there's some very, very problematic stuff in the medium. Yes, a lot of it is probably not going to be for you, but there's also some...
As any medium, not every book is going to be for you. Not every movie is going to be for you. Not every video game is going to be, but it's the same thing with video games. It's the same idea where like, oh, I don't play video games. Okay, try one. Try, maybe there's a certain genre you don't like, but there's other ones you do like. It's the same with any medium, I think, any artistic medium, that is.
Amazing things that you have missed out on because you haven't given the medium a chance. So as I said earlier, I attended MomoCon 2023, and this video's editor, Zatzman, attended Anime North in Canada, and we both asked around about what guys like about anime. We got a lot of great answers, but there was one in particular that stuck out to me that I knew I was going to use for the video. What do you think gets young men into anime?
I would say, I feel like in my case, what got like young men into anime would be like looking for like a place to like belong. If that makes sense.
Right.
And also kind of like it adds more personality than like what people think a stereotypical guy is like. Like it's not just all like you have to be like a man, all that other stuff. And it kind of lets you like explore.
Like what it means to be a person who is a man versus like a man first. Anime sees boys.
Definitely. And I really like these parts of the video where he's getting other people's perspectives through like an interview process at MomoCon. great idea. I really like it.
Sometimes the understanding that this is not a realistic expectation, that you are super powerful, that every female you meet is going to become secretly infatuated to you, I think that can be kind of a dangerous thing to internalize, because then it creates this expectation of like, well, society isn't like this isn't happening to me,
Yeah.
so what's wrong with me, or
What's wrong with society?
you know? And that's where, like, I just don't enjoy seeing power fantasies to that level. And I think that's like a reasonable, good way to live, to focus on getting good instead of being perceived as good.
I feel like the way we socialize boys is very externally driven. Be a strong man or boy to protect X so you can get Y, because people will think you're Z. You know what I'm saying? Versus like, be a strong boy because you're passionate about strength, because you have an emotional attachment to the feeling you get when you master something and improve something. These are scientifically like proven realities about motivation, that it's that motivation that comes from within is innately more valuable and more predictive of like happiness and success than external motivation. And this is obviously something.
Definitely. And I get the concern as well. And to me, it's like people are going to take kind of whatever they want out of any media they want. And I do think there's certain media that will put different ideas in other people's heads more than others, or whatever, you know. I'm expecting him to start giving examples. We'll see of like what kind of power fantasies is he referring to, and is he going to be making generalizations again, or you know, nuance? Because again, when people kind of get mad about it, is taking, because you're saying that there's a lot of this hidden depth in a lot of these other shows like Fooly Cooly or Dragon Ball Z or something, and there's a lot of intricacies and added layers and whatever. But the same could be said about these other titles that you might be, whatever he's about to say, was certain misgivings of and certain aspects of, they might not be getting the whole picture of. I don't know what those examples are going to be, or if I'm going to be able to give any of those off the cuff. But, you know, it's like, to me, all of this is a case-by-case basis. And I think you can make an argument that certain, you know, but even then, these kinds of arguments, it's like, this is going to be representative of everybody that watches this show is a this. Because that sorts of generalizations of fans who are like, oh, fans of this show are like perverts or something, or worse, You know, those sorts of things that people make those generalizations of certain titles and their fans all the time, and that's something I really discourage or hate seeing, really, because it just erases all kinds of nuance. You know what I mean?
The competitiveness that you see in little boys especially is impossible to ignore. You can go to any group of boys around the world who are between the ages of like 5 and 10 and ask them who's the fastest, and watch all of them raise their hands to proclaim that each one of them is somehow, in fact, the fastest boy in the world. And then with minimal effort, you can get them all to race each other to prove who truly is the fastest. And that's the other thing. Over time, as these boys get older, not only do they have to be constantly reminded of the distance between themselves and real men, the vast majority will also start to realize the difference between themselves and other boys in their same age bracket who more easily excel at these traditionally masculine endeavors. They start to notice what place they come in whenever these races happen. And once a boy comes in last or near last enough time in these playground
or
races,
is chosen
they don't
last,
raise their hand as much to even volunteer to race in the first place. And
yeah,
little boys might have to begin to grapple with their own shortcomings and inadequacy. I call this experience
and self-esteem for sure, and their own life experiences. And I you know, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not into this field the same way he is, or with other people are way more. But I'm sure there's differences, of course. But like this sort of thing, that seems like a human thing to me. That feels like, oh, I'm you know, in terms of the competition, I think by the time you get to an adult, you've had all those experiences, that the naivete has kind of, where, you know, you have more life experiences, that like, who's the fastest? You know yourself more as an adult to not raise your hand if you don't think you're the fastest, or some people have confidence or whatever, and they're not in an immediate way to agree that they're whatever. And maybe it is an attitude thing. It's like, yeah, if you ask a group of girls the same question, maybe you'll come up with a different response. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. But again, I'm not expert in this sort of thing. But like, to me, that sounds like a human trait. At least the kids that age, kids in general, would probably be like that. And then humans, they get more like adults, humans and children. They're not human. No, the adults, they all get more experience and they know themselves better, and they're not going to, you know, they have various esteem or, yeah, shortcomings, whatever he's saying. But to me, it's like, my point is, it's like, yeah, that does sound like a boy thing, but it also, it feels like it's just a generally human thing. You know what I mean?
of processing the different. In a perfect world, these boys will like have a strong support system and good adult male figures to talk to about their issues and fears. And maybe if they want to watch an anime, they'll watch Fooly Cooley with all its visual metaphors and challenging messages and breathtaking animation. Or they'll just be one of the several million people to watch power scaling videos. Because that's the thing, for all my gushing about the possibilities and greatness of anime, it's probably mainly a place for boys and young men to indulge in power fantasies, often to a fault. And to be clear,
Yeah, and the thing is, the power fantasies can happen. Like the thumbnail he just showed, with Goku, and like they were just talking about the hidden kind of like complexities and depth that Dragon Ball actually has. But a lot of guys, they're just going to boil it down to power levels. It's the same thing with One Piece. There's so many like power scalers with One Piece. It's like, who cares? It's like, and you're caring about One Piece of all things, where he like Oda has explicitly made it so that like it does not matter, and it's more of just like their ideals and context and situation and their personality, and it's not just like I'm strong, I'm stronger. Like, it's not about that.
to watch power scaling videos. Because that's the thing, for all indulge in power fantasies, often to a fault. And to be clear, a power fantasy in and of itself is not a problem, but anime's unique elements combined with the types of boys and young men drawn to it can make it not the healthiest combination.
Sure, but you can't blame the anime for that. Like I just said, like they're gonna do it for anything. Well, like, not anything maybe, but they could do it because this logic is so internal. And like, yeah, there's some examples and stuff like they take from the show itself of how much detail the show has. They're able to kind of back up their claims. And I think there is sort of a, I'm not going to defend it really, but because there could be a healthy amount of it in terms of like a healthy way to go about it if you're arguing in good faith, if there's boundaries. Is there an end goal? That's really the big thing. It's just like you're just kind of spinning your wheels. Like, who cares? Because it's like the Stan Lee quote, right? It's like, who's stronger, this guy or this guy? The answer is whoever the author wants to win. It's just that easy. It does not matter because it's all fiction. But and yeah.
And to illustrate this, I'm going to go back to what's probably patient zero, for me at least, in terms of like noticing this unhealthy combination, and talk about the character Kirito from Sword Art Online.
Really?
This character in this show probably gets more hate than it deserves at this point, but it's also a perfect example of some of anime's worst habits in depicting masculinity and power. Sword Art Online is what's called an isekai, which is a genre where the main character...
It's called an isekai. I'm sure Joe's already raised his point, so I won't repeat it. But not exactly, but yeah.
Main character themselves is often in the normal world this downtrodden and bullied and loser figure, and they go to the new world, and through some mechanism of chance or luck, they become this near god tier figure, and all their dreams come true, and all the women want to have sex with them. So in real life, Kirito is some super hacker, gamer, computer genius guy, just because.
Okay, yeah, because of the mechanisms of the story. That's fine. Like, I don't know. This feels like quite an easy horse to beat, and I know he's acknowledged that, but like, I don't know. But also, like, we're talking about season 1 of Sword Art Online. I wonder if there's any, because weren't we talking earlier about DBZ and like that moment with Vegeta? That happens towards the end of the whole series. Like 60 fucking volumes. Like a long series, very long. Multiple sagas have happened. This is like in the last arc that this Majin Buu moment happens. And that's because of all the build-up and everything. And we're criticizing Sword Art Online at the very beginning? You know, like, what does Kirito go through? What's his journey? I can't believe I'm defending SAO right now. But like, he does have but maybe not a journey that's satisfying or something, but like, I haven't seen Alicization. I've only seen the first 2 seasons. I did not like them. And that's not because of a power, but whatever. I just didn't like them. I don't know. But like, I've heard very good things about Alicization. What does that do that kind of address? I don't know. Makes me...
He gets stuck in an online video game with
Not to mention, power fantasy? Like, all the girls want to have sex with you and everything? I hate to... It's the meme one, Tenchi Muyo, or Love Hina. Like, we had a rash of harems in the 90s and 2000s. Visual novels and everything. And I'm not trying to, like, blame them or make a thing of, like, oh, this is the problem. I'm not trying to... But it's just... SAO in 2012? That's where it all went. We started to have the male power fantasy? In 2012? Really? All right.
Hundreds or maybe even thousands of other people, where if you die in the video game, you die in real life. And so he sets himself to beating the game and freeing all the people, which he does with relative ease because, just because. Also, over the course of like the first 2 or 3 seasons of this show, pretty much every woman that spends more than 10 minutes with Kirito,
Well, there's some alicization. There you go.
including even his cousin slash sister, and this is treated with no sense of ick. That's definitely like one fair warning to anybody entering into anime. They got some icks there with the incest.
All right. that's a title by title basis. You're not going to be like, anime has a problem, guys. You know, like, what about Koikaze, which actually gave a genuine problem of incest, like, and the like, oh, it's the actual, it really tried, like, not in the, like, oh, like, entertaining it, but like as a, I don't want to say deconstruction, like it's a genuine depiction of it in a way that's like haunting and kind of like disturbing, and not only like in a gratifying way either. It's really like the characters realize it's a bad thing and they're wrestling with that. It's like, oh no. Oh no. It's such a heavy but really interesting title. Koikaze, really recommend that one. But like, you have a problem with incest. It's like, yeah, but like they're not all of them. And the nuance, like, it's like the existence of incest, sure, but like, let's think about this a little more. We're starting to get more into generalizations, right? We're losing the nuance that we had initially, that we were praising anime for originally, right?
I'm not gonna hold y'all on that. Like, if you struggled with the Lannisters in Game of Thrones, you really, really need to make sure you're like easing into your anime consumption. Why does every woman that meets Kirito fall in love with him, even though he has absolutely no personality? Because, just because, nigga, like, that's how it works on so many.
Well, I mean, I have to rewatch. I say, I'm not a friggin' expert or anything, and yeah, it was kind of convenient that everyone falls in love with him and whatever, sure, but that's harems. That's all harems, and again, that is not didn't start with SAO. Not even close. Not even like Urusei Yatsura was that really the case. So a lot of people kind of typify it going all the way back to Urusei Yatsura because there seems to be the appearance of a harem. But the reality of that one, again, we applying nuance to this, Ataru wants a harem. And he wants to bed all the women. All the women. And his problem with the main girl, Lum, is that, you know, she's the only one that loves him back genuinely. And there's other like love interests, but they don't actually like him that much or have a thing for him the way that Lum does. It's a genuine romance for her. And he doesn't like it. There's tension between the two of them because he wants all the women, not just one, even though she's perfect. That's the irony, really. Anyway, but that's like one example, and that's like a pretty famous, you know, Urusei Yatsura is a pretty big title. It's introducing a lot of tropes and, you know, nuance to this. But like, yeah, this is weird. SAO, of all things, all right.
Many occasions, Kirito is met with a challenge that should present some interesting raised stakes or character development. And surely there are some cool moments to be had in watching him flex on people who don't know just how powerful he is. I won't say there's not entertainment to be had. I watched the whole first season for...
Not to mention, in the whole first season, he settles down with one of them and has a kid. Not like a real, like, but like they have like what they treat as their daughter. And they literally settle in a cabin in the woods. There is one genuine love for him. And all the girls like him in the same way. And there's a haremish aspect. But it's similar to a lot of harems where there's, at the end of the day, there's the one main character. There's the one. She wins. You know, that's the winner. Asuna's the winner in this particular instance. But another harem, it's the same way. Where like, oh, you could reasonably ship these two characters together. But really, he's going to end up with this one. We all know it. She's in the middle of the cover kind of thing.
It's no wonder why so much anime stars these types of boys, discovering some type of amazing power through some contrived means, like a magical truck that sends them to another world. And I wouldn't take such issues with these types of stories.
Wait, which show is that? A magical truck? Do you mean like getting hit by Truck-kun and dying and reincarnating? Which is kind of a whole other thing that's like, you know, has a little more nuance of like, why are these shows being made and who are they being written by? There's a lot more to this, I'm just saying.
As I've been talking about power fantasies this whole time, I'm sure there's some people who might get defensive and say that nobody is so down bad that they don't fully get that these power fantasy stories shouldn't be aspired to. And to them, I say you don't understand young boys, nor the anime community, nor how media influences people. For example,
Well, yeah, or just they're making their own kind of generalization. You do not know what kind of things people, what conclusions people will take to for any kind of media. And that always creates something that, like, oh, this type of media is bad because it influenced this person to do this horrible thing. But I think time and time again we've come to the thing, it's like, no, that's a really good piece of, maybe it's Minecraft. Then it's like, okay, fair, yeah, that makes sense, okay, yeah, no. I mean, like, wasn't it Catcher in the Rye that influenced the guy to kill John Lennon? Was it? Am I wrong about that? Or again, I might be erasing some nuance or something, or specifics. But, like, do we ban Catcher in the Rye now? I don't know. Yeah. So it's like, to me, you're right. They're doing their own kind of generalizations there. It's like, no, that's not really the issue, I don't think.
consider the way that sex is depicted in pornography and how many young boys are exposed to porn well before
Yeah.
they have their first sexual encounter. And without the understanding that porn is incredibly unrealistic, a lot of them allow their tastes and understandings about sex to be shaped by this over-the-top and often unrealistic erotic show. And this is not to say that porn is automatically bad, just like trashy anime isn't automatically bad. I love trashy anime and manga, and I know who Pinky is. But the reality of porn addiction is real, and while we don't have a clear one-to-one example about the consumption of these types of fantasies and anime negatively affecting boys, I still feel like we need to at least be critical and have a discussion about the possibility of how these types of shows can present a problem here. And the problem to me is this.
Yeah, and you really gotta take the show concretely and treat it for what it is, and really talk about certain scenes or examples, like what you were doing earlier. I keep bringing it back. I really liked how he was bringing up Fooly Cooly in specific scenes and episodes, or Dragon Ball Z, and and that sort of thing, giving concrete examples. But you just kind of were talking about SAO in this broad term, being like, he meets girls and they fall in love with him just because, or it's been a while since I've seen SAO as well. I watched it like 2013, 2014 or so, like really, a ways back. But why exactly did she, like, there's definitely some context, but anyway, I don't know. It's like, I'm waiting for this scene could have influenced in this way, but then that's really fuzzy, I don't know.
Power fantasy characters like Kirito or Meliodas from Seven Deadly Sins and others all have godlike levels of, keyword here, unearned power. Those characters are powerful just because power is cool. The concern here is what message that sends to young boys who are in that culturally influenced journey to seek power. And through this...
Yeah. You do have to kind of go through Seven Deadly Sins and see how is it unearned power? Is it unearned power? I'm not familiar with the Seven Deadly Sins. It's probably the case where there really is absolutely no explanation why he is this strong or whatever. But what he was saying there reminds me immediately of Hokuto no Ken, where Kenshiro, the main character, is the strongest. And he is, he's as strong as he is throughout the rest of the whole series. He very rarely does any training or goes through it, But, like, the context, the reason he's like that is because he was chosen as the successor of this particular martial art over these other guys for X and Y reasons and everything. And he still loses and still goes through a lot of hardship and challenges despite being so strong and unearned. It's like sort of like it's very unearned. Like, in what way? Like, is it really unearned? That's kind of hard to. Maybe it's not that hard to prove. I don't know. But, like, again, very broad statement about these titles that I don't think are substantiating his points all that strongly.
Right. There's this one this season that I'm just in the middle of writing a roast about. It's called I Got a Cheat Skill in Another World and Became an Unparalleled in This One Too. Is at the start of the anime, two things about this guy. One, super nice guy who will, if he sees a bunch of guys outside a convenience store aggressively hitting on a lady who doesn't want to be hit on, he'll be the only one in the crowd who comes up and is like, hey, stop that. She clearly does not like that. Two, he's insanely fat and ugly. Just the fattest, ugliest motherfucker there ever was. And his family, who are skinny and pretty, fucking hate him because he's so fat and ugly. He gets bullied, he has no friends because he's fat and ugly. It all comes back to him just being the fattest and ugliest. He punches a wall, and that shows him the isekai portal. So he goes through, and then he, gets these cheat weapons that let him kill a bunch of high-level monsters, and he levels up a whole bunch, and he goes to sleep. Next day he wakes up, he's tall, handsome, and skinny. And everybody claps. Literally everybody claps. And here's the thing. That's a recurring motif as the story
So
goes
that sounds
forward.
funny. That sounds funny. Now I want to watch it. Is it self-aware?
I don't know.
Editing Bay FD here, and I feel like this is a good moment to interject something that I realized in editing I hadn't addressed adequately in the video, which is the problem of depictions of sex and consent and women in anime. It's something I allude to, but I realized as I was watching this over and over, getting towards release, that it really needed more time than I gave it. But the video was already 90 minutes long, and there's time constraints, so I just wanted to make sure I addressed it somewhat here before moving on. When I asked here just now, is it self-aware?
All right, yeah. I want to move up before I want to address that point. Again, I'm happy that Jeff actually gives an example and is describing it, and that's kind of the fantasy of it, right? But that's the premise. That is the first episode, right? And he can make a roast or whatever. And I think there's some credence to something that like Trixie would say about like, if it's the first episode, if this is what it's giving you, there's not a whole lot likely that they'll give you this anything different or more for the rest of it. There is ways that you can tell in the first episode that this is going to have something more, that there is levels to this or whatever. But other times there's not. I'm not really a prescriber of that mentality. I would want to see that show where it progresses. What is it trying to say? What other characters does it introduce? Because it can't just have this one guy. Or maybe it does. I don't know. You know? Again, I would want to have the full story. I would want to have the full picture, I guess. And maybe I don't need the full picture when you're describing it for Dragon Ball or something like that, but like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just like, I'm a very overly defending person. Like when you're talking negatively about something, I try to see the positive side of things. But you know, I can understand that this, it's to an extent. But I guess this is a quick aside on misogyny in anime. Wonderful.
I'm getting at like this overarching conflict in watching anime and watching things that are clearly problematic and lewd and edgy and, you know, not appropriate for all audiences. There's a very fine line between self-aware and indulgent and maybe trashy elements in anime that I enjoy and think are okay versus things that exist in anime and thus in the anime community that are regressive and harmful and further contribute to the spreading of harmful ideologies and behavior in anime consumers. Like if this anime that we're just talking about is satirizing the issue of lookism and fat phobia with this absurd dynamic of being bad when fat and good when skinny, I'd maybe give it somewhat of a pass. But if it's just saying all your problems will go away if you weren't fat and ugly, well, that's a clearly different set of issues. And that line between self-aware and self-indulgent is where things get a little complex. And that goes for the problem with sex and sexuality representation in anime as a whole, specifically in shonen anime. Thankfully, first and foremost, a great thing about anime and manga that I don't touch on in the video is that there is a huge community for girl-focused and driven content in anime, which offers clear alternatives to women's representation in this medium versus the...
But they also, to be fair, the other demographics have their own problematic titles as well. It's not like, I don't really like this assumption that like all shonen has the problematic women and the shoujo are great. You know that's not true. And I could be making example. This is off the top of my head, of cuff and everything. I don't want to be like rattling off a couple of these titles that I've heard the things about. To be perfectly honest, I don't have that much experience with shoujo in the same way. I really want to, but I've heard similar kind of complaints about Boys Over Flowers. And see, this is what I'm talking about. I'm indulging in it right now, where I'm just making these broad claims and everything. It's so easy to do. And I'm not above it. I understand that I fall into that a lot of the time as well. But it's like, I'm trying my best to not do that. And really, especially if I'm making a video like this that has, you're constantly going over the script and you're watching it over and over again, and you're really hyper fixating on everything that you're saying, you know?
Not just that every female character falls in love with the protagonist, it's also the rampant casual sexual assault that happens for laughs in these shows. Fan service in anime isn't just a problem for how it hurts stories and distracts from good characters, it also contributes to misogyny and how boys learn to see and understand women, and don't get me started on the 1,000-year-old longs. Sex is presented to boys and young men in these mediums as a commodity, one they get access to, as Mother Basements just put it, by being the coolest, raddest gamer, or whatever nonsense is said in some of these spaces. Or possibly worse, if not there to just be lewd and for casual assault. Fan service, they serve as fodder for...
Nobody likes that scene, though. That's a villain. Anyway, I'm defending it, but like...
Something that is insidiously woven through so much media aimed at boys and men. It's a problem that I want to at least make sure I acknowledge. This to make sure nobody mistakes where I'm coming from. Because even when done innocently, this contributes to a lot of misogyny that women in these spaces and in general experience. And it also hurts the boys themselves who consume this type of content because they never learn to just normally interact with women.
What's wrong with that scene in Mob? What's wrong with that scene in Mob Psycho? what is genuine? I actually don't know. I actually don't. I'm not sure what they mean by that. Like,
So much media aimed at boys and men.
I get a lot of these clips. I understand why you're showing them and everything, but like this.
Innocently, this contributes to a lot of misogyny that women in these spaces and in general experience, and it also hurts the boys themselves who consume this type of content because they never learn to just normally interact.
I just feel like, again, I just feel like that scene of like seeing a person you like and everyone kind of disappears and you're just focusing on that person. That's not like a male to female thing. I'm sure plenty. I can't assume because I'm not a woman, but like women looking at men the same, like a guy that they really are attracted to and are in love with or whatever, has the same thing. Like that, just this scene in isolation. I just don't know why I have to make a big deal out of this, but I'm just like, huh? And it's I'm not even that big of a Mob Psycho fan, but it's just like, okay, but like, huh? You know, I get the sexual jokes. I get it. Not much of an excuse for it, really.
Or misogynistic. I don't think that lewd or trashy content doesn't have a right to exist, but as I stated earlier, there is no self-awareness of the line between reality and fantasy with so much of this type of content in its fan bases. I would love to live in a world where lewd and sexualized entertainment was respected and enjoyed responsibly, but we don't have that. What we have is a culture that will cry woke agenda whenever a female character takes up too much screen time or has too many clothes on, but the same community will Google Rule 34 images of that same character. What we have is a patriarchy. I'm leaving a couple of videos in the description that I think better engage with this conversation, so please check those out if you want more analysis on those issues, or just simply search YouTube for the problems of women in anime. This is not an underdeveloped conversation, thankfully. I'm just not maybe the person that needs to give the definitive statement on it. That's all on this for now, at least. Back to the video. I'm sure there's some...
Yeah. I get that too, and I'm also not one to really make it to what women experience. Like, this is making me feel objectified or belittled, or I'm not getting much value out of this depiction or something like that. And I'm sure that it could be the same thing for the other characters, like these pervert characters like Mineta and everything. It's just like, yeah, I don't know. It's also just like, I guess I don't want to try and make any defenses or excuses for it, but for me, it was always like, yep, that's a loser. Or I never thought like, with Mineta specifically, or like other characters like him, like Master Roshi or anything, I kind of always saw them as a fool. You know, and like, I'm not really, I don't think that character's cool or anything. Do you know what I mean? Like, what is the viewer thinking about or seeing when it's depicted, when they're depicting this character? There's a character that's like doing these sorts of activities or thinking these things or whatever. How is the audience seeing them? You know, I do think there's problematic elements with a blank slate kind of self-insert character falling on a girl and having this sexual encounter that's intrusive or objectifying and just not very comfortable and everything. And like, that's for laughs or for some self-gratification, right? There's certain ones like, what is this really for? And I think it's for those sorts of things. But I do think there is a difference, and I'm just really formulating this in my head now because I'm just watching this off the cuff or whatever. But like, honestly, Mineta really never really bothered me. Brooke never really bothered me. But like, that's because I'm not a woman, probably. Like, I'm sure there's other people who hate those characters or whatever. But it's like, what are those characters there for then? Why are they acting this way in such and such a way? I would imagine in Mineta's case, it really is just he's a fool, and he's just kind of like, look at this pathetic kind of, you know, some people are like that, or just kind of a self nod to the audience. It's still not a great inclusion, and I don't think it's not adding or to the show at all. If anything, it could be taking away from it as a flaw of sorts. And with Master Roshi, it's kind of a similar thing where it's like, what a creep, what a weird old man or whatever like that. I don't know if it's necessarily aspirational or something like that. It's like, oh, boys will think this, that this is okay to do. I don't know if they'll think that, but maybe I'm wrong. But, you know, I don't know. This is my perspective.
What that comes down to is a question of what kind of expectations does this character create? I wouldn't say I'm like in love with Goku as a character or anything, and that I don't find him that interesting. But to me, what's cool about Goku isn't that he's strong; it's that he trains. You know, like when I think of Goku, the first thing I think of is him doing backflips in the anti-gravity chamber on the way to Namek. And the moments like the super, like him turning Super Saiyan, they are powerful, because of the path that has brought him there. So say you want to compare that to something like Sword Art Online. They have like in-world explanations for why Kirito is powerful. The appeal of the character is he's powerful. You know, the appeal is like he's right there, and like I know I'm going to say that, and there's going to be a million people who are like, well, actually, it's this reason, this reason, this reason.
Yeah.
But when you're watching Kirito, are you watching him learn to become powerful, or are you watching him become powerful? Which does he spend 90% of his time doing?
So you have all these shows where the main character.
Yeah. John's speaking a lot of good facts, man. He should be on like in this scenario of unscripted and more often. I think he's spitting good facts. Yeah. I agree. I'm sorry about much. There was a lot I was invested in and passing thoughts, but I don't want to spend a bunch of time pausing and everything. Ultimately, I think at 2/3 into the video, I'm enjoying and appreciating the video because I figured with FD, he's really level-headed and coming from a decent enough place. It's falling through the same kind of pitfalls that, like, I mean, as much nuance as 90 minutes, but you know, it's kind of going after just SAO at this point and showing clips for some other things. But he's like, so many anime do this, and he showed Bleach, right? But like, I think there's certain things where Ichigo does earn or doesn't earn, and there's nuance to that because you know, unfortunately there is, and there's a lot. There's a lot.
Is mentally, socially, or spiritually ostracized. They're victims of bullying. They're victims of abuse. They're orphans. They're ostracized from their communities and villages. And they say to these characters in the story, through the story's themes, that you know what'll automatically fix this if you just get stronger. And this is really bad. What a lot of these shows do is draw.
Okay, you need to give the scene where they do that. Where is the scene where they're like, I just have to become stronger? And that's definitely the case with some of them, like One Piece. But like, in the case with One Piece, it kind of just makes sense because they're being ruled by the strong. In Fist of the North Star, actually, it really is. It's taking place in a setting where strength really is the only thing that matters. There's no government, there's no laws. It's a nuclear apocalypse, and so the only might makes. It's literally a world where might makes right. But then you have a character who's one of the strongest, but he's on the side of protecting the weak and doing what's right, you know. And that's the interesting contrast where no, it doesn't necessarily have to be that. You can be the strongest character and still have problems and emotions and thoughts, you know. There's more value than to being a man than just pure strength, you know, or just like and making you care, you know, caring about your fellow man and the world around you and having thoughts, you know, even just like having thoughts and opinions, you know. And that's characterization. And that's unfortunately with a lot of these shallower stories that he's talking about, is making these broad claims about. It's just that they don't have that, they don't spend that time on that characterization and in those small moments. But again, here I am making a generalization as well, right? But it's hard to be like, this show has no character. This show has no plot. I don't really like making those kinds of big claims because it's like, to what end? First of all, to what end are you even saying these things, right? And the other thing, it's just like, are you just making a generalization? And if so, it's like, what are we doing here? I don't know. I think it's not very constructive if you just kind of shots fired at what exactly? He's really only made a stick in the ground that SAO is a bad show for doing this. And that's it? Like, we're nearly an hour in this video and you've made that one claim? You know, it's a lot of like vaguisms and stuff. I don't know. You can go harder. It's like, this show does this, this, this. This show does this, this, this. This show does this, this, this.
A through line between the pain and trauma that these main characters experience directly to how they attain power if they go about.
Was that a clip of 91 days?
This is really bad. What a lot of these shows do is draw a through line between the pain and trauma that these main characters experience directly to how they attain power if they go about attaining it through any effort at all. Somewhere along the line, it became cool for boys and men to be completely personified by the fact that they're in pain. I think it's
what a weird clip, and I'm sure he's just taking this from like one of these YouTube things that he's talking about, like these compilations, which are really stupid and vapid and bad. I completely understand. But also, these guys are, you know, power since the beginning, and it's strong from the I always feel like sometimes it's like, are these fucking anime made up? Like, did they fucking generate this with AI or something? It's just so like, what are these anime? Some of them, and they're not the ones that are the most popular, or the most endearing, or the ones that you're most likely going to encounter, unless you really dive in for a number of years and then don't care what you watch, because a lot of people watch very passively.
Directly to how they attain power if they go about attaining.
But yeah, like the clip of 91 Days, that's no, that's not. I mean, that's like a prohibition era like revenge thriller, and that's only like it's not like a power fantasy. Maybe you could argue it is one, but I wouldn't describe it as that.
And get through any effort at all. Somewhere along the line, it became cool for boys and men to be completely personified by the fact that they're in pain. I think it's tied to the fact that for men, certain emotions are taboo. Anger and lust are pretty much the only safe spaces for a lot of boys and men to funnel all of their emotions to. Being damaged in some way gives a man an excuse to be more than just an angry, fighting fuck monster. And so it makes sense that a lot of boys might feel like that's a safe way to explore other forms of emotionality.
You know what? And I wonder if he's gonna get to this point. I'm sorry to cut you off. But like that was making me think of Kaiji, how the first episode you just have him like he has this very manly like really stern face and he's just crying because he's a loser. Because he just all he does is just spend time gambling, sticking small like little things with his friends and then popping people's tires because they buy expensive cars. He's a piece of shit. And then he gets a bunch of debt laid on him and everything. And yeah, like Kaiji's kind of known for this, for being like this mannish character that cries a lot and has a lot of emotional, sad moments. And the same thing with Fist of the North Star. I am shocked. At 55 minutes in, we still haven't seen any Fist of the North Star. I'm not expecting like a ton of representation. You have to cover all anime or anything like that. But again, if you're talking about anime and masculinity, damn. Where is it? Damn. Or Baki? Like either I'm not saying like these are like because a big muscly man, but I kind of am saying that like you want to like strong power fit JoJo's. I don't know.
And a lot of boys don't. They see these power fantasies in the form of damaged bad boys. They see the way they're depicted. They see the way girls respond to them. And more importantly, they also often themselves have traumas that connect to them through the story. And they don't understand that these characters and archetypes aren't celebrations, they're warnings. Or at least I think that's what they're often supposed to be.
I also think that you need to weight it against the power fantasy, the whole thing, because the power fantasy is a huge part of shonen,
Right.
And for the most part,
And John's still mostly talking about like Shonen Jump, and I think FD Signifier is more talking about the light novel stuff, because a lot of the web novel, light novel stuff, and again, I'm making a generalization. I'm sorry. That the titles he was showing on screen there, like what he was showing, are all from those sorts of things, or VNs or whatever. Not necessarily Shonen Jump or Shonen.
or I think that's fine. Sometimes, like when taken in totality, you can come across this idea that power is the overwhelming domination of your opposition, and to a point, that's true, but to a point, that's kind of tyranny, and in a way, it's like there's a gentleness missing from that.
To fully examine this,
Yes, exactly. With like Fist of the North Star, there's this really interesting contrast of like this really manly people, but being very gentle and kind, and the kindness of the aspect of Fist of the North Star is always very, and just how emotional that show can be. It's wonderful. Very good show.
I'm going to discuss probably, to me, the biggest failure in all of media's recent history of depicting the damaged, broody hero archetype as being way too awesome for its own good and being completely misunderstood by a large chunk of the people consuming the media. This is a guy that I've hated on publicly multiple times and talked about in numerous pieces of content, but here's where I fully, get into why I have a problem with this character in particular. So let's
Go
go
for
ahead
it.
and break down everyone's favorite sexy fascist icon, Eren Yeager from Attack on Titan.
Go for it. But I unfortunately I have not finished Attack on Titan. I like to be unspoiled. A roast of Eren Yeager. Oh, it's most of the. Oh, I'm so sorry. What if Eren wasn't trash? And then he talks about, okay, Guts. I'll entertain Guts. Hopefully it doesn't have too many. I have a vague idea of what happens at the end of Attack on Titan, but I'm sorry. I have the chunk of this video. I can't exactly watch yet. I will watch in October, maybe, if I remember. But yeah, I'd rather be unspoiled. For the record, I guess you can tell that Garrett, I actually do like Attack on Titan, but for aspects beyond Eren, like there is Eren, of course, which is this very magnematic and like compelling character for this and that reason. But there's other characters too I've kind of been invested in the world itself and everything. There's so much more to Attack on Titan than just Eren, even though he is a very central. He's that kind of protagonist that like really makes or breaks and is kind of the center of the universe really for that show. And I'm not going to be making I don't know exactly what FD's arguments against Eren are, and I'm sure he goes into them, but I would rather not be fully spoiled exactly what happens, even though it's probably I've seen the majority of it. It's just not the very ending of what I've been staying anime only. I mean, yeah. So I apologize. I'm not watching this big roast of Eren Yeager, which really could have been the whole like its own video, but okay. But yeah, I'll see him talk about Berserk of Guts. I love Berserk. Hell yeah. And I am caught up with Berserk, so let's go.
If you are an Eren Yeager fan who identifies with how Eren Yeager has allowed his pain to affect him, but also maybe wants to have more from that message, and maybe, God forbid, you're interested in stories about healing and growing, but you still want your edgy power fantasy as well, boy, do I have a character and story for you.
You know, a lot of people who've seen Attack on Titan have also read or seen Berserk. Maybe not a ton of them. Maybe you're right that the Attack on Titan is demonstrably more popular, or whatever. At least the first season on Mal, I guess. But like, Berserk is the #1 rated manga on Mal. You know, and it's not an unknown. It's like, here's this little known title. You should watch Berserk. I think most people, but maybe, you know, I'm down. Movie trilogy.
Berserk started in 1989, and I was 7. Which means that unlike I imagine the vast majority of Berserk fans, I actually engaged with Berserk from the age range in which it was designed for and the time in which it actually lived, and I got to re-engage with the story multiple times growing up, even though up until recently I never was much of a fan and never took the story very seriously. But I also think that's
yeah, your pinned tweet is just like, I'm reading Berserk, guys! Like, it doesn't really matter if you've like, this came out when I was 7. Therefore, like, when did Berserk come out in the West? Definitely not 1989. you know, but I could be wrong, I guess. That's a weird statement to make, but
much like Eren later in his story, at the beginning of Guts' story, he's kind of a piece of shit. In fact, if my understanding of Kentaro Miura is right, Miura basically planned at the beginning of the story to just have all the coolest, edgiest things he can think of be thrown into his manga. Guts is...
Well, you remember the first 3 volumes with the Black Swordsman arc, but right before it goes into the Golden Age arc, one of the last images you see of Guts in that post time skip, and that post eclipse version of himself, is him crying. It's him being like really sad. It's kind of a meme. It's kind of the meme picture of the, and it shows that he genuinely has emotions, and he's still being affected emotionally, and he's not all dead inside, which the eclipse definitely could have made him. They get it every right to just be this stoned, completely desensitized, mean, I don't want to say edgy, but completely callous individual for sure. And he had every right to how awful the eclipse is, but he didn't, because he had his experiences in the Golden Age arc were just that profound and impactful and meaningful,
mean-spirited, cruel, violent, reckless, uncaring, and he gives those classic edgelord speeches of, you shouldn't care about anything or anybody, you got to do the hardest thing forever by yourself, and no one cares, and Sigma grinds.
Show the panel. He definitely says stuff like that in those first 3 volumes, but show it. Give the example. This montage is nice. It's painting the picture, and he's not wrong, but like, I don't know. Just be more specific, I guess.
Set, and I don't know what this song is, but like this song right here seems to be the Sigma Grind Set song. Like that's playing the whole first arc of Berserk. And no shade to the Lincoln Taro Mura or any of the authors that make these edgelord stories, but I want to be clear. This looks cool to little ass boys only. All these stories about not caring and moving forward and never quit. This looks.
I don't know. It looks cool to me, but not because he's punching a guy in the eyeball. I think it's cool because of the perspective. He just has the fist really pulling camera, and it's also like this is a sequential. This is not just like an single art piece in isolation. It's sequential storytelling. It's a sequential image storytelling. So it's like the image, the whiplash of like this guy trying to stop him or whatever, and him turning around like this. It's like, whoa, there's a thrill, there's a surprise there. There is kind of a cool factor in that way, that, but like it's not. It is what you take out of it. You know what I mean? It is, but again, making this blanket statement like that is like,
It's cool to little ass boys only. All these stories about not caring and moving forward and never quitting and this, platitudes about courage that aren't met with any type of rationality or logic or empathy or humanity. This is the type of shit that, a little boy might think manhood is all about. Like, it should be obvious that I'm not a right-wing or conservative guy, and I don't hide that, right? But I guarantee you, if you ever need to find any commonality between me and your conservative uncle, or maybe any semi-respectable voice for masculinity from the other side of the political aisle, they will tell you that this fetishized caricature of male power as unbridled id and libido, absent of responsibility or sacrifice or empathy, is not at all the type of man that any young man or boy should aspire to be. And to his infinite credit, somewhere along the line, it seems that Miura realized this himself.
When he came up with Berserk first, he wanted the thing to be that defined Guts to be rage. Like, the story is called Berserk.
yeah,
I think it was his desire to look into that anger and to explore why someone would feel like that is what led to this just tremendous depiction of pain, but then also recovery from that pain. Like, Miura did not have Berserk planned out when he started. He was on the journey as much as we were. In very many interviews in life, he's talked about how he didn't know how Berserk was going to end because he hasn't taken that journey with the characters yet.
Wow. And that's when things in the story of Berserk become amazing. Miura,
and I don't think that counters with what I was saying about Miura depicting the Guts in that way and rage and stuff, because there is something more to him. Because Miura is a very he was very passionate about manga, and he had his best friend who was also a mangaka and passionate about it, and they were seeing, like, one of their favorites is Fist of the North Star. And the thing with Fist of the North Star, has a lot of those couldn't be more manlier. Like, I don't think it's maybe Baki. It's like Baki and Fist of the North Star. They're literally the most like muscular, stoic. Golgo 13, I guess, is another one, sure. But like all of those stories, they have a depth to them. This is what we were talking about earlier with Dragon Ball, right? It's not just the with whatever. That is what it is on the surface, but it's everything that kind of built up to that. And yeah, so like again, Fist of the North Star, it's like he has this emotional inside and his perspective, and he's actually a really kind individual. And Guts isn't necessarily that. At least not in like Golden Age. It's not like he turns into that or something like that. Man, he's had a rough time. But I would say that Guts even kind of represents that rage, at the beginning of the Golden Age arc and everything. And then but like I said, I don't think that like contradicts what he's saying. There's like that one panel right before Golden Age starts, of him being like really sad and like really like showing that emotion, and not just like all the whole time. There's nuance. The nuance is the best shit. I'm sorry for repeating myself fucking 30 goddamn times.
Who reportedly didn't have a plan for the greater story of Berserk when he started, set out to make sense of what would make such a man behave in this edgelord nihilistic way. So he created a deep, painful, yet joyful and beautiful backstory for Guts, starting from his birth under the worst possible circumstances to the cruel and abusive actions of his first father figure. It then shows Guts finding this chosen family, this friend group that for the first time in his entire hard life gives him warmth and meaning and even love. He gets so much security and life from these experiences with these amazing...
And ambition. He gets to think, and he actually wants to be friends with somebody. He never even he only thought about was surviving and his sword and like just making it and breathing, because there's like, I just gotta live at the very least, and that's all he was thinking of. And it wasn't until meeting Griffith that he's seeing that like there's someone I'm admiring and looking up to, and has something making him think, and so he's starting to look up to him. And then with literally my favorite part of Berserk, and I would say it's my peak. My peak is Griffith's speech to the princess that Guts overhears, where he's like, anyone who calls for me to call man my friend, he must be equal to me. And he really's like, oh fuck, I really want that. And it's like, that means I'm not equal, because like because Griffith just sees him as a subordinate that just, assassinated this guy. And he's just a tool. And he's like, I want to be more than that. I want to be this guy's friend. I'm tearing up. Sorry.
That finally gives him the strength to seek meaning for himself outside of fighting. And then right when he's finally starting to get the hang of being his own man, he has to watch all of these people die.
Oh, and then the fucking quote is like, everything I've ever wanted is right here before me now. Why do I never realize it until it's lost to me?
Everything that he's built up to that point. And as you might expect, this breaks Guts to his core. Much like Eren, at this point in Guts' story, he's lost everything. Has a perfect excuse to act not as a man, but as an animal, and he does.
Yeah.
The edgy boy we meet in the beginning is due to the drama of that person that we followed in that section of the story. So
Every
the first
reason
arc
to.
After the Golden Age, which chronologically happens after the Black Swordsman Age, Guts returns to his makeshift home and is faced with the ramifications of his decisions to go on this revenge-fueled rampage where he acts like an edgelord.
Because of that growth in the Golden Age, like, it was so strong that it didn't disappear. If he didn't experience that growth through Golden Age and experience love and friendship at all, and just kind of kept to the way he was ever since he was a kid and growing up, and then if he went through the eclipse, he would just remain a monster forever, or just die until he died, But these panels here, is she safe? And you've gotten taller. There's an actual recognition of those. He's still human, because he never forgot those sorts of things.
Like Eren, who does not have to ever face the reality of what his decisions have wrought, Guts has to look into the eyes of the friends and peers he had left that he abandoned to indulge in his pain and trauma.
Yes.
One man in particular, the man that gives Guts his trademark giant sword, looks in the face of this giant, inhumanly strong killing machine, looks in the face of Guts, the edgelord that can't be killed, and questions his manhood based on...
This is gonna take more than just a few elbow grease. You really make a blacksmith cry, right? I'm guessing you swing and shoot too often to eat or sleep. You can't stay sane forever fighting that way.
Off the principles that he failed to uphold.
Godot has like 2 one-page monologues, and I think that's one of them. And the other is him actually talking about the act of getting better at something and improving. I'm butchering it here, but I just kept trying to make the next hammer swing better than the one that came before it, and then I woke up an old man. So in terms of like Berserk, that is such a like powerful scene when Godot is talking about like, you fucked up, you went for vengeance, you went with rage, you went to destroy, rather than actually like not even protecting Casca, but just being there for her, being with the person you love. And it's so fucking sad because like the fact that they don't make it that big a deal, the fact that it's just this casual observation, I think brings it into this real realm of like, that could be your older brother, that could be your mom, that could be your dad having that conversation with you. And it's devastating. Like, it's genuinely devastating.
And the message here, at least to me, is that vengeance, violence, and being a lone wolf, that's the easy part. The hard part is living up to your promises and potential and growing despite what you've went through. And from that point on, something magical happens in this story. Guts changes. While his fighting style doesn't change, his reason for fighting does. He never stops being affected by his pain and trauma, but he responds to it differently. And there's moments where
why is this a Japanese raw? Wait, why was that? Okay.
And then, as he
I figured Berserk has decent scans. Why was that raw? Anyway.
It's powerful and far more valuable for boys to aspire to that framework of healing and understanding that you don't have to be defined by your trauma than to be the edgy fascist boy with the abs that literally destroys the world. And
but like there is more to Eren than that, and it's also that now that the story is endorsing that, he is kind of doing a wrong thing, and it is the audience's poor expectations of like, but he's the main character or something. But it is kind of, again, it's what but I don't know. Again, I haven't seen the ending of Attack on Titan yet, but the observation to me, I haven't seen the specifics of what happens. But it seems to me that those fans who are seeing Eren in this way, when they get to the ending, they hate it. And it's not the ending they want. And they kind of turn off from Attack on Titan. But then those are the people but then the other kinds of people that didn't see Eren this way, acknowledged him for what he is, and is also taking in consideration the entire story, the other characters in the world itself, and the way things go, and the messages that Attack on Titan is trying to say. The ending is amazing, apparently. That there's that contrast. It's really interesting. Again, I'm sorry I haven't seen them. I could be talking out my ass, but I'm pretty good friends with people that love this manga, love this series to death, and they also like Berserk a whole lot. you know, they're not stupid. And so I think there is something there. I don't know. Not to say that they, just because, but I don't know. It's a weird thing to pit one and the other in this way. I don't get me wrong. I literally just made a Berserk and Gungrave video comparing the two. I get it. But you know, it's in a constructive way. I'm just like, look, I like both. I'm not trying to say they're both, even though the title says it's better. Whatever.
In between all of this, yes, all the ladies still want to bang him, and even a few of the guys. And it's still a great power fantasy watching him cut monsters in half with one swing of his giant, not at all phallic sword. And he still looks awesome. But the reader is both confronted with that awesomeness and with the reality of trauma and pain, and how power can maybe make it easier to deal with those things, but it does not fix those things in isolation. And reading it just gave me hope, and it made me realize that we just don't talk about healing enough when we're talking about boys. We keep talking about boys being lost in this loneliness epidemic. We keep talking about the rise in suicide for men over the past few decades, and those are serious issues. But I'm reminded of the conversations I had with these boys at MomoCon. These boys were not lost. These boys were not alone. And maybe some of them are assholes when they take off the cosplay. I'm sure it's possible. But we have to remember to focus on the good things surrounding young men right now. And as many views as I know my next anti-manosphere video might get, it's more important to me that my other videos that talk a little more positively about these issues get more traction. And like, if you think about it, Luffy from One Piece is 100 times more popular than Meliodas, and boys aspire more to the
Damn right
of Goku more than the bland self-indulgence of Kirito. And in his
damn right
patricidal future dreams, Eren Yeager couldn't hope to be worthy of polishing Gus's smallest sword.
Okay.
And I'm not alone in that thought. Like, shit is bad, but it's not that bad, and it doesn't have to be that bad. The badness of the situation that boys are in is not the whole of the situation.
True.
And the thing I love about anime is that it gives us examples of this. It gives us examples of boys going through shit and fighting through shit and growing stronger, not always for the sake of being stronger, but for the sake of being better and following their passions and achieving their dreams and taking care of their loved ones. I wish.
Definitely. And again, those are human, universal ideas. And it is the freedom that anime has to do both. To have those like nuanced and challenging, interesting types of series, but even just the stuff that isn't for boys, you know, like Technolize or Monster. You mentioned Monster. You know, a ton of different kind for all, and not just we're just talking about boys here. We're thinking about like all the media, the Japanese media for young girls and young women, and what are the things that they're into, right? By that I mean, like, you know, they can also be into this Battle Shonen stuff, or with Gundam or whatever, you know. And yeah, it's the freedom that anime has to do all of that, you know, including the shallow or the porn or whatever. Like, the fact that there's just so much anime porn and everything, it's just going to show that they're willing to go there, you know, and willing to do anything. It really is limitless possibilities with this medium. Within some reason, there's certainly plenty of successful trends and habits and stylistic choices that are, you know, all some whatever, but it's not homogenous. I would not call anime homogenized. I wouldn't call it that.
That anime avatars on Twitter didn't signal to me danger. But I know that when I meet a young man that is into anime, that there's good things that are going to come out of that conversation. Because the joy that young men show in that space of loving anime, or probably anything that young boys get into, that is opportunity. And
I agree. I also get very excited whenever I hear that somebody's into anime, because it shows that they have an open mind. It shows that they are interested in good stories. What can I say? Or just are excited by things. Because there are some narcs that are just not into music or or whatever. Yeah, not to single those people out, I guess. But it's just like, you know, being cultured, I guess. I see you're a man of culture as well. Kind of like that. But it's just like when you hear about you like that band, or you like that author, or you know about that director, or things like that. It's not it's not just like the top 40 hits, or the biggest blockbusters, or just, oh, you're into this sort of, you know, and they're not interesting in that sort of way. When they're into anime, that's exciting, bar none. Even if they're into the most surface level thing, like SAO or Naruto or One Piece, whatever. Heck, I'm very happy if they're into One Piece. Yeah, it's a very exciting, and I'll let him finish, of course.
What it takes from us is to like be focused on that as opposed to the things that are actually bad going on around them. Believing that boys are worthy of and expected to be good and joyful and loving and loved, as opposed to being feared and corrected and policed. In a way, I've spent so much of this video talking about the bad stuff to avoid the obvious, which is there's opportunity for goodness out there. Boys like anime because anime is awesome. And it provides them with aspirational images that are also awesome. And yes, maybe some titties every once in a while. And that's all I got for this video.
Sure,
Please
and the women can like the titties too. Nothing wrong with that. Yeah, I liked it. I did ultimately. And if at least it didn't take me 6 hours. I'm sure there'd be like a lot more like people have qualms about it and everything like that. But I mean, there wasn't a ton of blatantly wrong or misleading, like skewing it in a way that feels annoying or opportunistic or dangerous even, or I don't know. It felt, I think it was coming from a constructive place. I also just did appreciate that he was talking with other anime YouTubers and even just like encouraging conversation about this video by like the fact that he went on that appeared in this live stream. I'll watch that afterwards for sure. But yeah, I it's just very encouraging to see someone in our space talking about, and I really like the ending thought. It's certainly a lot more positive than I've seen a lot of people talk of, when it comes to this sort of thing. They never think to end it on a constructive, holistic, positive message. So that's good points for FD there. But yeah, I did enjoy this video. And I hope you enjoy this reaction. Thanks for watching. Yo, peace.